Imagine living on a beach, working when you feel like it, but not worrying about saving or planning for retirement. Well, this is the life that coasting financial independence, or Coast FI, could grant you. Financial independence. It's the dream of anyone who hates working or just hates being told what to do by a boss. It's the ability to say, no, I want to do what I want to do, not what just pays the most money. If you are familiar at all with financial independence, it's most likely through the FIRE movement, or Financial Independence Retire Early. This movement is where you save and invest as much of your income as you possibly can, basically trying to build up a big enough nest egg to the point where the interest it produces is enough to pay for your lifestyle for the rest of your life. A lot of people find this method extremely attractive because of the freedom that it grants you. But the downside is it can require you to scrimp and save every penny and kind of sacrifice your life up until the point when you become financially independent, which for a lot of people is in their mid-30s. While this is still better than slaving away until age 65 at a job you hate, what if I told you there's a better way? This is where coasting financial independence comes in. Coasting independence, also known as Barista FI, is basically the idea that you have enough saved for retirement that if you just leave it invested, the compound interest that it will accrue over time will be enough to cover your retirement at whatever age you plan to retire, usually around 65. No, sorry, it doesn't mean that you necessarily live on a beach and you're retired. All it means is that all the money you earn goes toward your living expenses. Now, while this might not seem as glamorous or as sexy as FIRE on the surface, this is actually a really powerful statement. So let's dive into some of the benefits of Coast FIRE. I think one of the reasons that Coast FI hasn't gotten the same attention that Financial Independence Retire Early has is because the benefits aren't quite as clear on the surface. You have to dive into them a little bit. So let's just imagine for a second that you make enough money to cover your living expenses, and then that's all the money you need. There's no need to save anything because you're already covered in retirement. Think of the freedom this gives you in pursuing something that actually gives you self-fulfillment. It doesn't really matter how much the job pays because all you need is enough to cover your own living expenses. This reminds me a lot of a story in The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. In it, he tells the story of an American banker who's going on vacation to Mexico. One day, the American banker is out and he's just sitting on the pier watching the water. He sees a small fishing boat pull up with a Mexican fisherman inside with a bunch of tuna fish. He marvels at the quality of the tuna fish and he compliments the fisherman on the quality of his catch. The fisherman says thank you, and the American banker asks him, "How long did it take you to catch those fish?" The fisherman says, "Well, I just went out this morning. This only took me a couple hours to catch." The American banker's confused. He says, "What are you going to do with the rest of your free time?" The Mexican says, "Well, I'll take my fish home. I'll probably fish a little, play with my kids, maybe take a siesta with my wife. And then I'll probably go out in the town and maybe drink some wine and play guitar." The American banker says, "Okay, but what if you spent that extra time fishing instead? With the extra money, you could buy a bigger fishing boat. And then with the extra productivity from that, you could use the extra income to buy a whole fleet of fishing boats. Then the next thing that you can do is you can start to sell the fish directly to the processor, cut out the middleman. At this point, you can move your fishing operations to LA where you can make even more money. Eventually, you can start running it remotely from New York City." The Mexican fisherman looks at the American banker for a while and says, "Okay, but what do I do then?" The American banker replies, "This is the good part. At this point, you can IPO your business and sell it to the public. At that point, you'll make millions and millions of dollars." "Okay, but what then?" "Well, then you take your millions and millions of dollars and you retire, maybe to a small Mexican fishing village. At that point, you could maybe fish a little, play with your kids, take a siesta with your wife, drink wine around town, and play guitar." I think the point of this story is pretty self-evident. What's the point in making a bunch of money to live the life that you want when chances are that life is available to you right now? With Coast FIRE, imagine that you're the fisherman. You already have enough saved for retirement, so all you have to do is just live your life the way you want to. I'm not saying you need to go and become a fisherman in some small village, but that's what the fisherman found self-fulfilling. That's what he wanted to do. So what do you want to do? When you know that you are completely set for retirement, you can live like a free soul, do whatever you want, while still being financially responsible. The only actual downside to Coast FI is you have to keep on working. But is that really a downside? One of my hobbies in my free time is to basically read everything I can about personal finance and financial independence online, whether it's YouTube comments, different forum posts, Reddit. One of the themes that I've picked up on when reading about people who actually achieved FIRE and retired early is that after 1 or 2 years of enjoying themselves, they start to get bored. The fact is, you can't just sit at home doing nothing all the time and feel self-fulfilled. The majority of people want to do something productive with their lives. They just don't want that to have to be dictated by how much money they make. A lot of people who retire early end up going back to work, working a lower paying job that just gives them self-fulfillment. A lot of the time they realize this job actually pays for their lifestyle, so they can just let their retire early nest egg keep on growing in the background. Well, wait a minute. This just sounds like Coast FI, but delayed. So if once you reach retirement, you're going to end up working anyway, why delay that until the point when you're completely retired early? Why not have that now by coasting FI? It's much easier to build up a nest egg, which through compound interest will let you retire once you're actually old enough that you don't want to work, than it is to build up a big enough nest egg that you never have to work again. So how do you know if you've reached the point of coasting financial independence? Well, unlike with FIRE, this calculation can't just be based on one specific number, because your age is important. With coasting financial independence, the bigger a nest egg you can build up the earlier in your life, the easier it will be for your compound interest to help you retire by age 65. The best way to calculate this for yourself is to pull up a compound interest calculator. The first thing you need to do is determine how much money you need to retire. For a lot of people, around $1 million will be enough for them to retire at age 65. The reason for this is with $1 million, you can withdraw 4% every single year, which will come out to around $40,000 a year. By withdrawing just 4%, you will never actually touch the principal of your investment. Your entire income will just be generated off of the interest that your investment produces. So then you can just work backward from that number. How much money do you need to have saved at your current age in order to have $1 million at age 65? Now, for your specific scenario, it could be more than $1 million. Maybe you want to retire on $80,000 a year. Well, all you have to do is take 80,000 divided by 0.04, and that gives you how much money you need to have saved up by age 65. So to give you an example for coasting financial independence, I decided to look at my own situation to see where I stood. So if I enter my initial investment of $100,000, and then I give myself 40 years to invest that money. Since I'm 25, this means that I'll be 65 years old at the time that I retire. I then put in a 7% interest rate, which is about what the market will return when you account for inflation over a long time horizon. If I put in those numbers, it comes out that I will have around $1.5 million at retirement. This means that at age 65, I can pull out around $60,000 every year forever and never run out of money. Now, let's say you're a little bit older. How much money might you need if you were, say, 35 right now? Well, if you're 35 years old and you want to retire at age 65, you only have 30 years for your investment to grow. So you're going to need a larger initial investment. If you put in the same numbers I did, where you assume a 7% interest rate over the next 30 years, you need about $150,000 invested in the stock market right now in order to have $1.1 million by the time you're 65. This will give you about a $40,000 a year income. Now, if you want to be more conservative, you could try using a 5% interest rate over the next 30 years. This is just if you really want to make sure that you'll have enough money by age 65. If you use a 5% interest rate and you're currently 35 years old, you need around $250,000 invested in order for that compound interest to build up to $1 million by age 65. While this is still a big chunk of money, it's nowhere near the amount of money that you need to retire early at your current age. All you have to do is hit this amount of money invested, and you can consider yourself coasting financial independence. Now, interestingly enough, I actually didn't realize that I had achieved Coast FI until I started running the numbers for this video. I personally have always been a lot more focused on the FIRE movement, and because of that, I think I lost track of what it actually means to be financially independent. Sure, I couldn't go out right now and just not work and retire for the rest of my life, but is that something I really want to do? The real goal of financial independence is freedom. And if you can achieve that freedom simply through securing your future through coasting FI, I think that really meets the definition of freedom. Because at this point, you're free to do what you want with your life. You could sit on a beach all day and teach surfing lessons, and that would probably be enough to pay your bills in certain areas. As long as you have the freedom to live the life you want, that should be the goal. And it's because of that that I think coasting financial independence should be a much more widely known term than it actually is. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time.